What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Binge Empire podcast. This is Brian here with my co-hosts, producer Dave and Kyle. And today we're talking episode 5 of The Last of Us. I personally thought this was, shall we say, a return to form for this show. I think episode 4, mixed reviews. Dave, you were higher on episode 4 than Kyle and I were, but I think overall the community even said that was a little bit of a step back, and they really gave us a treat with episode 2. So I think we're trying to regain our footing here, and I think episode 5 exhibited a return to that good form. You know, we're already in Seattle. We're starting to kind of move into the plot line. We have Ellie confront Nora, so we're finally getting into kind of Abby's gang and a little bit closer to Abby, which is good plot progression. I think there were some really good action sequences, and as the video game SME, I think there were several things that they did really, really well from the video games. But those are my thoughts. Kyle, Dave, what are we thinking?
Yeah, I honestly thought this was a really good episode. I was probably expecting it to be not as good as it was because just with 8-episode seasons in general, I feel like that 5th episode, we're 1 episode out of the midway mark. That usually kind of slows down a little bit, but it didn't feel like that at all in this episode. I thought we get a lot of suspenseful scenes here that I'm, sitting, waiting back, watching, and I'm nervous, man. I'm nervous for our characters. I'm nervous for Dina. I'm nervous for Ellie in other capacities, but I truly thought this was a great episode and leaves off definitely in a tough situation.
Yeah, I think this was a decent episode. We got a lot of, I think, like high level interesting things happened. If you want to look at like a bullet point outline of the episode, it's nice to see Jesse again. We got a Tommy name drop, and that hopefully we'll see him.
Is it nice to see Jesse again? Is it?
Yeah.
I'm nervous, man. I'm nervous. I feel like as soon as he stepped on the screen, all of my worries that I had about Dina just transferred to Jesse. And I'm like, Jesse's got all the signs now. He's got all of them.
That, and then the Nora of it all. We got some interesting world building as well with the spores and the airborne stuff happening in the hospital. We'll see what kind of impacts that will have moving forward. It just feels like it was just a good episode mid-season, towards the later season. We're setting ourselves up, I think, for a solid conclusion to the season because there's only 2 episodes left, right? There's 7 episodes in this season.
Oh, 7.
I believe so. I double checked it before we got on here, and then I'm kind of.
I think you're right.
I feel like I remember us talking about 8, but I looked at before this and it was 7.
Yeah.
So
I think was definitely me spewing
that.
That was me
feels
spewing
more like
misinformation.
We're kind of moving towards like an emotional finale or like ending, especially with what happened with Ellie in this episode. So I think we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, no, I like all that. I think it's in a good spot right now, and that's just bad podcasting host on my end, not knowing if it's 7 or 8 episodes. Either way, it's going to be a short season. It's going to be over before we know it. So they definitely have a lot of action left to pack into either 2 or 3 remaining episodes. And I think this, like you guys said, was a good episode to kind of push us towards that stuff. But we have this cold opening scene, and The Last of Us has done this a couple times where it's kind of a scene of people that aren't close to the current timeline's action. And we have Hanrahan talking to this lieutenant, a sergeant, someone who was commanding troops within the WLF named Elise Park. And Hanrahan was sent on behalf of Isaac because Isaac was dealing with something else, and essentially just got word, I hear you've been killing some of our own troops. What's the story? And she's kind of walking through the hospital and sees that access to the basement has been boarded up. So it's kind of eerie vibes coming in. Elise is clearly rattled, and she tells this story, our orders were to clear out the hospital, and we cleared out the first 6 floors, no problem. So the only thing that was left was the basement. I sent in a crew, and it was all clear, no issues to the one side of the basement. And then I sent my boy Leon because he's my best, which I just kept thinking Resident Evil Leon Kennedy. It's like maybe that's where they got the name Leon, whatever. But they sent him down and he radioed back, hey, it's in the air. He's like coughing up a lung. And he said, you got to lock us down here because we're all cooked at this point. And that's kind of the story. And obviously, this is going to bookend this entire episode because inevitably, Ellie and this whole story is leading to this basement of the hospital. So I think this was a very good way to kind of frame this episode.
It's just another way too, and maybe we'll talk more about it at the end, but like we've touched on it a few times throughout this season discussion of this is just so terrifying and frightening, you know, like the potential of the cordyceps, just like the mushroom nature of it, you know, like we're getting the like communicative aspect was really big in episode 2, obviously, and then we saw it last episode as well, and kind of the connected network of sensations that it can then trigger. And then now we're moving towards what I believe was kind of the original thing in the games, right, where it's more of an airborne like spore focused is probably not the best way to say it, but like spores and that stuff is a much bigger thing that happens, you know. So it's just like, okay, this another check mark that this sucks ass and it's so difficult for us to survive and live. Like you know, like rebuild society to a level of dignity. Like what's going on?
That was exactly my one note takeaway from the beginning and opening of this episode is we've been saying for 2 seasons now that these are some of the worst zombie apocalypse situations you can find yourself in. And the only, I guess, saving grace in all of it is that the only way to get infected was by being bitten. But now it's airborne. So now we're just in the world of just the absolute worst zombie apocalypse you could put yourself into. But this definitely puts a lot of stakes on the line. And obviously we knew we were going to be heading to this basement at some point. But between the adaptations that we saw in this episode and the ones that Ellie, you know, encountered earlier with the stalkers and everything, I wonder if there is a correlation between it becoming airborne and now we are seeing these intelligent clickers now. So well, I'm curious to see where that develops. But yeah, man, this place sucks.
You didn't have a note written down that we confirm that woman wasn't the prophet?
Oh yeah,
Hanrahan.
True, yeah, was certainly not the prophet.
You skipped over the fact that theory was dead on arrival.
I did not. Yeah, I did not want to admit it. I did not want to admit it. Just slide it under the rug. But here we are. I have to admit it.
Maybe I missed something. What was the line that confirmed she wasn't?
Like they're already kind of talking about the prophet. Like they were referencing the prophet. Yeah,
gotcha. Unless she's a double agent who faked her death and is now a member of the Wolves. I mean, she can't possibly. She's who recruited Isaac, so she can't possibly have been the prophet.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah, and I guess we'll get into it later, but the airborne nature was a mechanic introduced pretty early on in the game. Even in the first game, which would have covered season 1, there were several levels where Joel would just be like, hey, masks on, we're in a dingy basement. So that was a mechanic of the spores and everything that was introduced early in the game. I'm surprised they waited this long to reveal that layer in the show. But again, they had kind of more of a hive mind played up in the show, and they're just kind of revealing how sinister and formidable these cordyceps are slowly, piece by piece. They've already added on the quote smart infected in the stalkers, which we saw again in this episode. So yeah, these are the worst infected zombies of all time, and they just keep getting badder and badder.
Yeah, I mean, it's more to create the environment for the actual story to happen in, but man, like how are we getting out of this concept, that this idea, this environment? Like we talked about it too in episode 2, like you can't possibly ever know that it's been eradicated, you know. So it just becomes like a complete dealing with it versus conquering it, I guess. And it's just so crazy to think about. You could literally never relax.
Yeah, and you know, this is maybe going down a bit of a rabbit hole, but the whole thing is Abby's dad was supposed to make this cure that would have been a save-all for humanity, and I'm thinking to myself, good luck curing every infected across the globe. Like, how, even if you have this awesome cure. How would you even go about doing that? It's just such a massive scale. But anyway, so that was kind of its own little cold opening. We get the intro, love the guitars, and then boom, we get the little title, Seattle, day 2. So we are starting our second day here in Seattle, and it's Dina. We still have this walkie-talkie from the WLF, and she is pretty much just absorbing all this information as a sponge. She has a map. She's trying to triangulate their position based on what she's hearing from these WLF patrols, and she's doing a pretty darn good job at it. Meanwhile, Ellie turned on a generator, so we now have power in this theater, offers to help. They have a little bit of a back and forth where Dina's essentially like, well, you weren't the best in school, so why don't you just leave this to me? And then that leads Ellie to go out into this theater. She picks up a guitar and strums a couple chords and then sings the line, "If I ever were to lose you," which will be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out Pennsylvania, baby.
Oh, yes. Big
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out Pennsylvania and the Amish. That was just nice. I was like, hey, that's us. Well, not actually us, but our state.
No, I made a note of the Pennsylvania shout out. So thank you for, I clearly glossed over that bullet point.
No
But
worries.
Ellie does a little guitar, and then Dina comes out and says, I think I figured it out. And essentially says, okay, they have this thing pretty thought out. They patrol along this line, except for this one building, which they completely omit. And they're both like, oh, gee, I wonder why they don't go anywhere near this building. Of course, that means there's infected in there. So they're like, hey, listen, this is just kind of what we got to do. We've handled infected before, whatever. The other thing is they start talking about the scars, and they suggest, I have no idea why they're just broadcasting all of their locations, all of this stuff freely over a walkie-talkie. And that's where we get the Pennsylvania shout out. She suggests they're kind of culty, religious. Maybe they're like the Amish and they just do not mess around with electronics. So that's why the WLF is so emboldened to just freely broadcast their information, because they know the scars won't pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a deductive reasoning? I don't know why. I just was going to say, like, I just like the way that they figured that out. And I only literally brought that up to just talk about the fact that it just reminds me of playing werewolves and you and Chris Dave just going deductive. Deduced it.
Yeah,
they totally deduced what why the wolves like are acting the way that they're acting, and the stuff with the building and all that. So Dina's just so useful, like unbelievably useful, while Ellie just like
absolutely
chills and plays the guitar and is kind of moody in the corner. I'm kind of curious, Dave, of like the guitar scenes are they seem to be built up as these emotional things. I think we interpreted the first one as emotional because of the song, and we like the show The Magicians. I think not because necessarily this show has been getting that emotion out of us. I'm kind of just curious how you felt, because when she was on stage and the guitar stuff happened, I was just, it didn't really make me feel anything.
Yeah, that was one of those moments where I was like, all right, maybe I can type up a few notes here real quick on what I've been watching so far. It didn't really, I get it. They're trying to play it up as, Joel is Ellie's inspiration of, music, and this is her only way of really kind of keeping that connection in her mind, maybe. So she is, whenever she can, is trying to play these instruments, but yeah, they're not doing necessarily much for me. But yeah, Dina's resourcefulness. I don't know how Ellie, if Dina doesn't exist, like how does Ellie even get any of this revenge plan done? Because it feels like she would be dead 10 times over at this point.
That's the thing. She wouldn't be successful. And Dina kind of already went over that right before they left Jackson and was like, okay, what's your plan for this, and that? Like, what trail are you taking? Ellie clearly hasn't thought it through. And with regards to the guitar thing, it is weird because I was watching this and I know the full story, of course, and I'm like, this is weird. I don't think the audience is really going to understand it, why this packs an emotional punch. And I have a feeling the show has a couple cards up its sleeve. So in hindsight, it'll make a little bit more sense. I will just tell you right now, they could have committed 3 minutes of airtime to her doing a whole song again, and that would have been like Bizarro World. So they just kind of planted the nugget of that one line, so at least they didn't belabor the point. But again, at the end of the day, the guitar is obviously symbolism for her relationship with Joel, and they want to keep that in the forefront of our minds. Like, this is all for Joel. She's constantly thinking about him, and that kind of brings out the soft points of Ellie, which we don't necessarily get to see when she is otherwise on the screen. So I think that's what they're doing there.
And does Dina drop the L word here, right, or is that later on?
That is later on when they're in the
Okay.
building.
Right.
But boy, she does drop it. So essentially, they have a plan. We got to get to this building under nightfall, and then we'll just kind of, once they make it to the other side of the building past the infected, they're very close to the hospital. So that's kind of the whole game plan. It's still during the day when they walk out and start heading towards the direction of the hospital, and they see some graffiti with "Feel Her Love," and right below that says "Feel This, bitch," and it's just a pile of massacred scars. So, you know, the WLF and the scars ain't getting along. Dina vomits again.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way that the conversation kind of turns after this. You know, Ellie obviously has this reaction to Dina's reaction where she's almost thinking out loud too. And it's like, what the hell am I doing? You know, I mean, like, you're literally pregnant, you know, and I'm just kind of dragging you along on here. And like, if you don't want to come, like, you don't have to come. And like, that's kind of natural that like this conversation will come up. I'm glad that it got brought up like within the like first 30 minutes of the episode after we've learned about the pregnancy. And then, you know, Dina has her ability to kind of squash it almost completely as well. So I just kind of enjoyed that the show brought it up because I'm sure people were thinking it. It was natural that they would have this conversation. And then Dina's kind of convictions on the other side of it, I think, in my mind, kind of put a lid on it moving forward.
Yeah. And this is going to sound like messed up, but I've been enjoying the gruesomeness of this all because, I mean, it adds that real level of intensity and it gives you that perspective of both sides and where they're coming from and just how intense this whole war that is going on really is. Like, this isn't just, you know, people shooting each other. There is torture, there is brutal deaths being had here, and I like that the show isn't really stepping away from that, and they're, if anything, embracing it here just to add that level of, you know, threat and make it show really just how deep this hatred goes between each sides. And like you, and to go into what you were saying, Kyle, with, you know, the opportunity presenting itself to touch on the whole pregnancy thing, it was a great way for us to come back into it after leaving the last episode with that whole reveal coming up. And now, are we sure we want to do this? Are we sure we want to commit you into this? And how it follows up is I thought a really nice way to introduce Dina's backstory as well.
Yeah, unfortunate backstory.
Unfortunate, yes.
Yeah, it was interesting that Dina kind of uses that as somewhat of a jumping pad into, I don't want to say convincing Ellie, because Ellie doesn't need to be convinced necessarily to get after the revenge, but like maybe as a demonstration of like Dina's level of conviction, where she's kind of saying like, she almost like I don't want to say seeds ground, but like kind of like acknowledges that what happened to Ellie was worse than what happened to her, you know, and that like if Dina was in her shoes, by just through the sheer fact of witnessing it, Dina was there, but she was unconscious during it. That she's like, you know, I would want to do whatever it takes. You know, I just thought that was interesting. I don't know. It was just like I walked away from the scene thinking like, that was interesting, and that Dina almost felt like she was making Ellie's case for Ellie.
No, and I'm glad Ellie
should feel that way.
100%. And we kind of even talked about it in the past couple episodes of, you know, Dina's conviction and all this, and how much, like, how bad does she want the revenge as well? And we've been kind of questioning that. And with the inclusion of her backstory, it's almost like she was forced to relive what she had experienced all those years ago, but with a different perspective of, okay, imagine if I went through what I did that like years ago, but this time around I was forced to watch it happen. And if the killer got away, she puts that whole spin on now because she, being that close to a situation of Ellie's, can understand at least the pain and anger that she experienced, but to see it happen in the way it happened and to know that the killer is still out there, that is what set it over the edge for Dina. And I do like how we're getting it here, that we understand Dina's conviction. Like, she is full on pissed. She loved Joel. She had a similar experience in the past, but now this is kind of like her way of getting revenge again, almost. But this time, because the killer walked away, she has her resolve. But I don't know. I thought it was really well done. Again, it was a little bit surprising, but we have talked about in the past, like what is driving Dina to join Ellie alongside, besides her being in love with Ellie. And this was, I thought, really well delivered by Dina here in terms of, I want to do this. I will listen to you, Ellie, and what you want to do. And she pretty much knows that Ellie is going to still follow through with it. But this was a tough conversation for sure.
No, you guys hit a lot of good stuff there, and somebody will have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Dina did not have this backstory in the game, which was something I always wondered. Essentially, her only conviction motivation was, like Dave just said, she loves Ellie.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout the entire game, I was like, whoa, she had a pretty good setup there in Jackson. That's a big ask to go to Seattle just to seek revenge. So this completely kind of validates why she would be there. It gives a realistic context as to why Dina would kind of leave Jackson and the safety there to follow Ellie on this journey. She gets it, essentially. You know, she said, if I wasn't there to kill that person who killed my mom and sister, much less if he made me sit there and watch it like you did to Joel, I would commit my entire life to revenge. I would find that guy and I would take him out. So it's like you said, Dave, she kind of gets this second chance at a proper revenge, and she just gets it. So that was good contextualization of the character of Dina and why she's here. So obviously Dina says, it's up to you, but if I die, that's on me. And Ellie's like, all right, well, I guess it's on you. Let's keep it moving. We also haven't seen, obviously we've been seeing that Dina is capable. You know, she's smart. She makes all the plans between her and Ellie, but that was a little bit of the fire of Dina and a little bit of the fierceness where it's like, okay, she's not just that bubbly person. Like, she's got that edge to her too, that killer instinct, if you will, which, you know, you're not going to survive in this world if you don't have that. But moving on, it's later in the evening and they make it to this building. You know, there are searchlights and everything, but they make it into kind of the foyer, the front room. And Dina's like, okay, there's some positives. That door is open and we haven't been attacked yet. So let's just think this through. It's a building. It's not terribly big. So there can't be like a massive horde. There's WLF activity. She's just trying to be optimistic and be like, what's the worst case scenario? Like a handful of clickers and some stragglers. Like, we can do this. We got this. This is where she drops the L word. It was actually a really funny back and forth. She's like, has to emphasize, hey, if it comes down to shooting or running, we have to run, because if we shoot, the WLF is going to be on our ass swarming us. She's like, hey, Ellie, are you hearing me? We got to run if it comes down to. And she's like, what? You're a little crazy, and that's exciting, but I really want to live through this. So that was a fun back and forth. But yeah, and then they kind of sweep through this building, and it's one of those, it's quiet, too quiet situation. And of course, they get into the main room. We have these lovely shots of just maimed torsos and arms hanging about. And this is where the stalkers reveal themselves, and just, I don't want to keep dissecting it. You guys just walk me through what you're feeling in this scene when it turns from 1 to 3 to 7.
I was shitting some pants over here, to be honest. My britches were definitely getting filled there.
Steamy Ray Vaughan over there.
Dude, Steamy Ray Vaughan 100%. The one clicker, I was like, okay, Ellie has some experience, and she even said, you know, Stalker, yes, definitely. And she even says, you know, I struggled in my one-on-one battle with it last time. I came away bit. So obviously these things are tough, but we're in a 2-on-1 situation. I have all this experience. So I'm like, okay, yeah. Like, I'm totally into just fuck this thing up 2v1. Then she looks back over and there's 3 of them. And I'm like, yikes. And then she looks forward and then there's 3 more or whatever. And I'm sitting there thinking, there's no way we're making it out of here. And this is where Dina's cooked. I absolutely thought Dina was getting bit here. Absolutely. But britches were full. That's for sure.
It was definitely got to a point where, like, Ellie's on the floor. There's probably 4 of them on top of her. Dina's out of ammo.
They're ripping through the fence.
And it was just like, Like
WLF has to save him. Was my thought. That was the only way.
and almost to that. And I was also kind of thinking in the moment of like, what would actually like Ellie could die from being like eaten alive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like she won't get
Yep.
infected, but she can still die by getting like literally eaten and swallowed. And it was just like the chaos of it all. It was interesting with like the lone wolf, let's say like Good Samaritan. I don't think I anticipated it being Jesse or Tommy. You know, like you said, I definitely probably imagined it being shout out to the moms, Mother's Day. I probably imagined it being like a WLF soldier, like you said. But our boy, baby. Our boy shows up, saves the day. You know, at first I was kind of like, how the hell did he find them? Like, come on, get out of here. But I'm glad they kind of addressed that later, which I'm sure, you know, I don't want to jump the gun too much and run away from this. But
yeah, immediate first thought was, how the fuck is Jesse here? And then immediate follow-up thought was, okay, I'm happy to see him. But then this is where my third and final thought comes in of, God, Dina is so saved now that Jesse's here. And Jesse's going to take one for the team. Dina's going to live with the baby. I'm so worried for Jesse. But it was great to see him in action because we've really only seen him, you know, be a leader and provide that moral support. We haven't really seen him, you know, take on some clickers. So it was great to see him also show that he's capable in that regards. While we obviously could have assumed that from the get-go, at least we can confirm it here.
Yes. Jackson's resident good guy, Jesse, comes in to save the day. And Dave, like you just said, he is all business. Even when they get to the park, he turns around. Ellie, does it look like I'm fielding questions right now? Like, are you kidding me? Zip it. Like, I just bailed you out big time.
And so that was good. She even is just like, we were fine up until, and then he's like, up until what? And it's like, yeah. That's absolutely, you guys were cooked right there.
He was going to shoot her. Dina was she didn't get bit. He was going to kill Ellie right there. And not really. I mean, he would think about it probably after, but I don't think he would have thought about it in the moment. He was just like, all right,
he was ready.
You got yourself into this. Like, I'll just have to end it for you, basically. But also, I mean, kind of speaking of deducing, it was kind of interesting in hindsight to think like why the WLF like could have possibly been able to leave that building alone. And it is kind of, it does make sense that the only way that really would be possible would be the stalkers, because I feel like the, let's say, regular infected or even the clickers like would react a lot more to like the activity happening outside with like the patrols. They're probably moving tanks, like turning lights on, like all that.
Even if they're normal
noise.
Ones, just send in a couple people to just take them out. But that makes even more sense that they're just going to avoid it in general because they are stalkers.
Yeah, because the stalkers won't. It doesn't seem like they would, you know, leave the spot. It feels like, you know, like if you enter in there, they'll fuck around with you. But like if you just leave them alone in there, then that makes sense that the AALF has kind of just made that calculated choice. Because if it was like a bigger horde, they would probably be attracted to all of the noise and such happening on. So I think that logically felt very consistent in the aftermath of it all. Like afterwards, I was like, oh, it makes a lot of sense that it would have been like a lot of stalkers in there.
I thought this scene was crazy. It was hectic from start to finish. And like I said, turning from 1 to 3 to 7, especially every time. Yeah. How they're trying to break down, okay, this time it's 1v2, maybe we can do it. Then it's like 2v3, and it's like, okay, we got to run. And then it's like, oh, we can't run because there's 4. Like,
now we got to fire some guns at this point.
How those dominoes fell, I just think it was very well done. And Jesse coming in to save the day. Dave, you just seem committed to someone has to die between the good guys. So it would have been like, now that Jesse's here, he's the dead one. But I was going to say, is it nice to see Jesse because he seems to have been a fan favorite in Jackson?
100%. And I guess the reason I'm so convinced now that someone needs to die is because all these emotions, I was expecting Joel, you know, I was going to be the one preaching that Joel was going to be dying this season. And at the end of the season, he would have died. But he died so early on. I need to latch onto someone else dying now that he's gone. You know, I don't think we're going to get happy endings for everybody. The show has obviously shown that it's a fucked up world and fucked up things are bound to happen. So I'm trying to save myself some emotions now. I'm trying to hurt a little now so that when it fully happens, I don't hurt as much.
We get it. You're an Abby stan and you're rooting for the Wolves.
Yeah, sure.
I just think a part of this story is going to be Ellie having to learn the lesson of the danger of being so one-track minded toward revenge. And it just feels like that's going to have to come at the cost of. It still feels like Dina, to be quite honest, because will Jesse actually have that level of emotional impact on her? Tommy, maybe. You know, we know Tommy's.
And for the record, I don't want anyone to die. I love all of these characters so much. They're all great characters.
Of course.
This was like probably the right, I guess, moment to like. There was two things about this episode that I just like stuck out to me as I was watching that was like slightly less enjoyable. And the first one is just like the accuracy that we have when we shoot infected versus the accuracy we have when we're shooting at other people. And it's just like them running across the open terrain, just dodging bullets is like, okay, whatever. And then it happens later on with Ellie in the hospital. And I'm just like, okay, I get it. Like, you know, we're creating tension, but it is just kind of like, sometimes I'm sitting there being like, we're purposefully missing shots to build tension right now. And it's like kind of frustrating for me to watch.
They all went to the Star Wars Stormtrooper Academy of shooting. So that's fine. It's a trope in every single show, everything ever. So we'll let it slide, I guess, but not without a comment, apparently. Anyway,
but the other one being, just when they're kind of in the park and Jesse's talking to them, and when they're asking like, how'd you find this? And he says the stuff they left in the theater. And my only thought was, how the fuck did they find the theater? Like, how were the lights on? Did they leave the lights on? I was just kind of curious if other people were thinking about that. It was like an almost unfortunate thought that I had, because I don't want to have to think.
No, I mean, I definitely thought, like, how did you perfectly find our girls in this exact building? I know it was maybe circled or something. Like,
the building felt fine with the explanation of I found the supplies, but more of like step zero of finding the supplies.
Unless that theater was on the exact road that Dina had left at the original way that Jesse was able to find them. Like, I just feel like, there's no way that he would have known that this exact, unless it was on the road that Dina had.
But also, it's really not necessarily that important. I mean, the big thing for me is Jesse and Tommy are now in Seattle. You know, that's hell yeah. Because we talked, I mean, mostly, I think me extensively of like, what the heck is the Jackson Hole story for the rest of this season? But, you know, we're just going to take the characters we care about the most in Jackson Hole and bring them to Seattle. And it's like, I don't have a fucking problem with that.
Now we're fine. Yeah, now we're good.
Yeah. Give me that locational consistency and I'm not going to complain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jackson's coming to Seattle. That was always the answer. You guys speculating how that remains relevant in the story? I was like, nah, let it go. It's gone. We're in Seattle now. Like, move on. Get on the train, boys. Yeah. But no, like you said, so they make it to the park and the WLF says, ooh, we don't go into the park, which is never a good sign because that means something worse is going on in the park. Jesse fields questions, which we've already went over. But the noteworthy thing is that he came here with Tommy and they are scheduled to rendezvous the following morning. So fingers crossed he's still alive and they can find him. But they don't really have a chance to catch their breath because they stumble upon the Scars, who are having an execution ceremony akin to what we saw in the TV station, where it's, I guess he was a WLF. I didn't see if he had the tags on, but yeah, they're hanging him in the noose, and the pastor or whatever has this giant sickle, and as they raise him up, he just stabs him in the torso, and it just kind of makes an incision that all of the intestines pour out of. So we see how they kind of conduct their business, and it is terrifying. And then Dina takes an arrow to the leg and things are happening and they have to split up. But this was, again, another crazy scene. It's so much just went on in these kind of 10-15 minutes. It was really cool to watch.
Mm-hmm.
There were potentially two theories of mine that took a big hit with that one arrow being shot. Of one, it seems now slightly less likely that Dina actually ends up dying. I feel like because she's injured now and she'll probably hang back if they do any type of mission. So it's like, okay, slightly incapacitated. You
Who
stay
does
out
that
of danger.
leave?
Yeah, well, Jesse naturally, Tommy too. I guess let's say, and then the other one being, I was really interested in the potential, and then it's not dead, but the potential of our team and the Scars kind of creating this type of interesting alliance and connection. Not that that's completely dead, but it was like we didn't have a chance to have any type of the dialogue, So just be interesting, I guess, to watch maybe going forward if that's something that happens. If maybe Jesse or Tommy, someone that might look at things in a more objective manner, potentially float an idea of like the Scars actually have information. They know the city a lot better than we do. They hate the Wolves, we hate the Wolves. Is there an avenue there? The Scars maybe don't necessarily seem like people that are looking for, let's say, allies of this type, but I'm just still so interested in the possibility that I'm going to keep bringing it up until it's actually dead in the water.
Yeah, winning them over is going to be really tough. Even if you want to call it winning them over, it's just going to be so tough because obviously in this episode it's well depicted that both sides, when they see an enemy but they can't, actually physically see what they look like, they're just so quick to assume that it's the opposing side, like the WLF hear intruder and they just immediately think Scars or Seraphites, and the Scars see that there are intruders nearby while this whole ceremony is going on, and they're so quick to think WLF. And how do you even sneak a moment in to kind of defend yourself and say, hey, I'm not with them, and seeing if that does come up somehow will be interesting. Obviously, like you said, Kyle, and like we've been all saying, that there is definitely room for them to work with the Scars and the Seraphites to since we have a common enemy in the WLF. But I really love this scene. Again, just the gore and the intensity of the whole situation is just really depicting this brutal war that's going on. And I mentioned it in the last episode that I'm curious to know the meaning and the reason of why those bodies were being hung the way they were. I mean, we see it now that they're being gutted as they're being hung, but what does that really mean? And then as the ceremony is completed, he says, now they are free. What does that have to do with all this? So there's definitely some deeper meaning in the whole ceremony of the sickle and cutting them open and why they still opt to not use technology in this time. Yeah, I am so into the Scars and WLF rivalry. I can't wait to see how this all plays out in the end.
Part of me is slightly nervous that it's just like a backdrop thing versus like maybe something that we explore in more detail. I agree with you a lot. I hope we do. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna just plant a flag. I'm just gonna be Team Seraphite until I'm convinced otherwise, because it's fun to play.
Yeah, if I had to pick a side, I think I would also be Team Seraphite at this moment.
It feels like maybe just given their vibes that they feel like they could maybe be more in the right. Yeah, but we don't know. Obviously, we have no context beyond,
and it's probably going to be one of those things it's going to be one of those things where neither side is going to be in the right. It's going to be gray, just like the whole Joel's a gray character. What did Joel do, a right or wrong thing? Right?
He's bleach white to me.
Wow. Yeah, the Scars fit the mold of the guerrilla, rebel, tribal fighters versus the WLF, who fits the mold of the militaristic, authoritarian faction. Yeah. So, yes, it's easier to root for the Scars. I will also say, like, the whistles, they established they use it to communicate, but in the dark with these torches, hearing the whistles in the distance, like that's a very eerie, intimidating aesthetic, I guess you can say. So when they're actually using that to communicate in battle, it's very formidable and it's just really cool. And I think this episode encapsulated a part of the game that is really such a unique, like, cool part of the game where you can be in a building and you have to have one battle style trying to maneuver around infected, and then you run into a WLF guard who like raises an alarm, and then you have to full on sprint through a building complex, and then you find yourself in a park, and yet another enemy in the scars. So you're kind of fighting zombies, then a military, then like these people in brown rags and stuff. And it's just all rapid fire, one after the other. So this episode did a really good job of showing you all of that. But yeah, this was a cool scene. A little bit more of the Scar lore. Kyle, your team Scar. Dave, your team Abby and WLF. So that'll be a little rivalry going on in podcast, if you will.
Oh,
but
man, if I could whistle, I would whistle right now, but I can't whistle. Fun
baby.
fact.
I can never
I'm training.
Like, you just can't whistle, period.
No.
We'll get to there, boss. I have never been able to do like the whistle in a stadium, like massive loud whistle, which you would totally have to do if you were a Scar. You can.
That sounds like Alki.
Make it high up in the leadership.
Mm-hmm.
That's an Alki thing.
Okay. So moving on with this scene though in the park, right when she takes the arrow, it's time to scramble. And Ellie, the best plan you can come up with on the fly. Jesse, you carry Dina and make it back to the theater. I'll draw them away. She is able to hide in like a tree trunk, which whatever, we get it. The Scars kind of move on. And then she looks up and sees in the horizon the hospital. It's so close, she can taste it. And obviously she has eyes on revenge. So she starts moving towards the hospital rather than go back to retreat to the theater. And it's a pretty quick scene. We have this security guard with a dog, and she just can kind of slip into this little hole in the side of the building. Believe you me, this was a whole drawn out mission trying to infiltrate the hospital, which they couldn't commit time to in the show. Totally fine, but just wanted to make that point. And yeah, pretty quickly, actually, we get face to face with Nora, which this was a very interesting conversation. I am interested to see what you guys thought.
I was like, shoot her.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
They're having a conversation, and the longer they're having it, and I'm just like, just shoot her.
This definitely was an interesting conversation. At first, my mindset was Nora, of the people that were a part of the whole mission, Nora, at least to me, seemed like one that was, I guess, very against the idea of like torturing and killing Joel. And so it was surprising for me to hear her when she said, nah, fuck that guy, or whatever she exactly said to really get Ellie's gears grinding. That's when I was like, okay, shoot her, because fuck that bitch. But I was kind of shocked that Nora felt that way, because it felt like previously, if I'm remembering it correctly, that she was always one that was kind of advocating against the whole torturing and killing of Joel. Maybe she was in to kill Joel, but was she not one that was against like torture? Like she just wanted it to be done.
I understand it. They were all there because they were on board to kill Joel. Abby was the only one that was really on board for the torturing and drawing out. I think all of them just wanted to get their revenge and go away. Nora included.
Yeah, but I guess for me, I read it more as like a trying to rile up Ellie.
That too, right? And yeah, definitely.
Yeah, to like, I don't know. I mean, in my mind,
I mean, her best.
I wouldn't be doing that if I was her, you know. But I think
she was right though. The best way for her to get out of it was to have Ellie shoot the gun so that more people would be drawn to the noise. I get that part of it, but she is risking her life to get Ellie basically put down here.
Yeah. So Nora's exact line is, "It was a terrible thing, but the little bitch got what he deserved." And then she throws a bucket of water on her. But to Ellie's credit, she had a couple good quips in, because Nora immediately is like, "Hey, we could have killed you." She says, "Yeah, maybe you should have, or maybe you should have stayed the fuck out of Jackson." I was like, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
I was like,
it's on. Yeah. It was good. But this was, I think a lot of these lines were plucked right out of the video games. The chase scene where you're sprinting through the hospital and she's saying intruder, drawing other guards' attentions, and you are just focused on Nora, and it was one of the most annoying parts of the game because during the entire chase scene, you are able to like hold up your pistol and try and line up a shot, but it is so exceedingly difficult. Like it really is a chase scene where I'm sure the mechanic of the game is you physically cannot get the shot off in time, but she's just too quick. She always closes the door right when you think you have the shot. So again, maybe I'm talking about the video game too much, but this was very well done from a video game perspective. And like we said, inevitably, this whole episode was always destined to end in the basement of this hospital. And sure enough, Nora is unarmed. Like she has to get away from Ellie. She jumps down the elevator shaft and has to kind of go through this basement. And right when Ellie gets down there, eerie vibes. There's particulates in the air, like deathly silent. You just know something is off. And sure enough, she rounds the corner. You start seeing the cordyceps plastered to the wall. And then right when she really turns the corner, the entire room, like head to toe, is just cordyceps. And there was a nugget of information in that opening scene where Elise said, we were expecting the worst in the basement because we knew that this was the hospital and specifically the basement where they brought like patient 0 in Seattle. Like the first people during the outbreak were brought there as patients before they knew what the hell it was. So anybody down there has been there decades, just marinating in this infected soup. Disgusting. But this was nightmare fuel. This was ew.
I thought one of those guys was going to say something to Ellie.
Well, and it did
puff pass.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Up pass. You did see that the second guy on the wall was Leon, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I assumed.
L Park name tag.
Yeah. Well, also it'd be interesting if, because they had only been down there for how much time. So is there? I mean, I don't think we'll get it, but there's got to be one of them big bulls down there. Someone had to be marinating in that soup for what, 22 years or 26 years or whatever. That'd be pretty crazy. But
thick
I just once Ellie flicked on like the red, like emergency lighting, I was just like, oh, I like this aesthetic a lot. I was like, this is going to be very interesting. The visuals from this part of the episode until the end were just like, it felt like they kind of nailed them.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. I mean, the particles in the air, they were really emphasizing that. I mean, the clear, if you will, smoke that was emanating from Leon's body as he was coughing, and just the clear depiction that this is now clearly airborne. My only complaint is the one shot that Ellie had when Nora jumps into the elevator and she kind of like falls and she's just like laying on the ground. Ellie takes her shot and it like misses, and it's like, it was like, girl, come on. She's laying there right there for the taking. But we wouldn't obviously have this really well done scene either. I love how Ellie introduces herself, kind of like Aura walks her way up to Nora, who is now just succumbing to the spores, and she's just like, you're the guy. It's like, yeah, I'm the guy. Shout out Spy Kids 3. But I thought this was a really badass scene, to be honest. So, and I was, again, we've kind of talked about in the past, like, is Abby in the right or wrong? Was Joel a good or bad person? But at the end of the day, seeing Nora in this moment hurting after what she did to Joel, I was pretty happy to see it. If I can't lie, it was pretty satisfying to see her in this agonizing pain.
It's tough, I think, as the viewer, to kind of watch Ellie go down this specific path. Obviously, not even 4 minutes ago, I was saying shooter. There's maybe a slight amount of gray area between beat her with a steel pipe and shoot her. But this was just kind of, I guess, what I kind of talked about at the top of like the emotional kind of journey within one episode that Ellie goes on. And that beat times, you talked about it too, with the guitar being like, okay, we got this softer side of her, but like getting this first taste of what it's like to get revenge and how is that going to impact her kind of character moving forward. She's always been this level of like fierce, let's say, like a little bit crazy, like Dina said, but like we haven't seen her like this, let's say, since season 1 when she kills that cannibal guy.
you know, like back against the wall, like cornered animal. But this is her like in a dominant position, kind of like reveling in the level of power. And I think that specifically is a little new to us and to the character. And it's just going to be interesting to see what kind of impact it has on her going forward. Like, will the Ellie that rendezvous at the theater with Jesse and Dina is obviously not the same Ellie that split up with them in the forest. That's how I kind of feel about it. And I think that's going to be one of many, like we're talking about the scar, you know, the rivalry, the feud and all that stuff, but like really something that I'm looking out for in the next 2 episodes of like, is there like a noticeable tone shift consistently with Ellie's character after she gets all this stuff? I mean, it was so interesting that Nora gives her the truth. Let's say we talked about that a couple episodes ago of like, when will Ellie find out the truth, like the wolves' truth? They're inherently at some level biased truth, and she literally just says, I know, I don't care. It's just like, god damn. Okay, I mean, she just is like, whatever, like it literally doesn't matter, especially at this point. You know, there's going to be a journey with her. It seems like we're getting this one at a time. You know, the walls are going to close in on Abby as we're getting one more member of the crew, and that road that it feels like she's going to go down. And it just feels like there's a lot of, while it will be heartbreaking, I think, to watch at some level, it's just so intriguing as well at a level.
It's so complicated, this situation, because I feel like if you would have asked me last episode, and maybe we even did do this, is like plant your flag on, is Ellie going to get a revenge? I think we actually did do this, and I think I was on the flag of, you know, she's not going to get a revenge, but man, does this set her back so much of I mean, Nora in the beginning of their interaction, you know, was trying to like level with Ellie's sympathetic side of it a little bit, but obviously that didn't work, and she goes down the route of antagonizing Ellie. But oh my gosh, I mean, I feel like after this whole occurrence, it's so hard for me not now to see Ellie getting her revenge on Abby, in terms of, okay, sure, we're in Ellie's revenge story right now. She kills Nora, but then, you know, Abby's going to hear about this one way or the other, and when she finds out that it's Ellie, okay, now Abby wants revenge back on Ellie, and now we have 2 sides that are gunning for each other. And how do we ever get to the point of just, okay, let's just let bygones be bygones? I mean, Ellie's clearly leaving Nora here to die. I mean, there's no way Nora comes out of this alive. So we're deepening that hole of revenge on both sides. And if Ellie didn't do this, I would have been more confident in like, okay, I can see that, you know, Abby, maybe there is potential hope in that Ellie doesn't kill Abby, but this sets Ellie back so much. Just like, if she's already killing one of the group members that wasn't even like really purely responsible for killing Joel, it's like, how are we ever going to get to the point where she forgives Abby, you know? And I can't see that right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's for me at least, like that's the part that makes me think that like Dina is just so on the chopping block, or Tommy is on the chopping block, or Jesse's on the chopping block.
Yeah, like you took Nora from me, I take Dino or Jesse from you.
Or just of like, she's
the natural balance of it all.
Yeah, she's so in this mode right now that it's like revenge is the only thing that's going to fill this hole in my heart. Like, this is like my reason for waking up every day, is to get this revenge. And like, it seems like it's going to be this journey of, this is her first taste of it. So, you know, she's going to maybe like the way that it felt, and then she'll get to the other members and it maybe starts to lose its feeling. And then she realizes through the loss of someone on her own side of like, oh my gosh, like there's really not a benefit to what I'm doing. And I can see that being the way that she doesn't necessarily get the Abby type of revenge. You know, it would be the ultimate, let's say, show of, I guess growth maybe is the word that I'm grasping for in this particular moment, of like learning from what's going on. And it's going to take, you know, probably 4 to 5 people dying.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how these things, I guess, tend to go revenge wise. But I don't think that the stuff with Nora changed that being my take
and
Like, you
that the
still
story
think
is
she
one
will-
about going down the road of revenge, but in the end choosing
forgiveness.
not to fully enact it, versus the story being about getting your revenge and feeling hollow afterwards.
I agree.
I'm still
I
on that
agree.
train.
But this was definitely, I mean, I could have swore at the start of their conversation that, Nora was going to play her cards right and say, I didn't want to torture him. Let me just explain that you killed one of Abby's father, and let me just kind of keep sympathizing with that. But it didn't go that way. And yeah, I'm definitely excited, man. A lot of good stuff.
Yeah, it just feels like Nora was an appetizer. I
For
think
sure.
Ellie, and I'm not to say that I endorse this at all, but I think Ellie's gonna kind of like
The one
how that
dude is
felt.
the one guy that kicked Ellie, whatever, at
Mm.
the end of killing Joel. Like, that is going to be, I think, the peak of her satisfaction for revenge getting fulfilled, potentially, before, excluding Abby, if that does happen. But she is going to see that guy and be like, this guy, I hate him more than a lot of people right now, besides maybe Abby.
Yeah.
And I could definitely see him getting killed by Ellie.
Yeah, that guy's name is Manny, so we'll see how
Manny.
he's doing maybe coming up.
How
Manny's
dare you
about
try to
to-
take that double consonant ending in Y name away from Tommy? Maybe Tommy, that's the matchup. We need Tommy versus Manny.
Manny's becoming a mannequin with how dead he's going to be.
A mannequin. Okay. Well, it got a little bit away from us at the end there, but you guys were picking up on some very good story beats. No, this was an iconic scene in the game, and it was very impactful. Kyle, both of you were touching on it. I think it's one thing to say that you want revenge at all costs. It's a completely other thing when it's you versus the quote villain in Nora, and you have a pipe in your hand and she's suffering to start whacking away at her leg to try and just get information that could get you closer to this revenge on Abby. You are essentially committing the atrocities that Abby committed on Joel that sent you down this path. You are getting your hands dirty so that you can achieve this revenge. And it just goes back to an eye for an eye makes a whole world blind, all of those different things. But Kyle, you said the Ellie that finally makes it back to the theater with Jesse and Dina will be a different person than the one that was in the park earlier this episode. Yeah, I mean, you can't torture someone and not be a little bit changed as a person. And with regards to actually getting the information out of Nora, I think Ellie has two things working for her. Number one, I can torture you, and this could be a very slow, painful death, or I could just take you out quick. Number two is I could not kill you at all and let you turn into the infected, and you saw my boy Leon plastered to the wall. Do you want that to be your fate for the rest of eternity? And if that's me, I'm giving away, sorry guys, my two best friends in the world, because I do not want to be a zombie strung up on a wall for the rest of my life. Maybe I would just lie really good and not give up your
there you go,
location.
there you
But
Wow.
I might slide into the
100%.
Jimmy hiding the zombie bite fucking pantheon
Wow,
of podcast
yeah,
takes
for
right
sure.
there, maybe. I told you not even 2 episodes ago I'd get on a horse and ride across the country with you to get revenge, and now I'm fucking getting thrown to the fishes in Seattle.
The one thing I'm going to be curious about, but I don't think that they're going to touch on it at all, is I feel like Ellie is covered in spore residue, and her immediately going to Jesse and Dina probably shouldn't be like the smartest thing. Like, I feel like there should be some sort of quarantine, but I doubt that's going to be addressed at all, because again, there were a lot of those spore particles down there, cordyceps particles, and I just watched Chernobyl, so I'm just thinking all that is just on her, and it's just emitting to those around her when she walks out of here. I don't know if I like that. I doubt it's going to get touched on, but it should be.
She hasn't been decontaminated yet.
Jock.
Dave, is that your first time watching Chernobyl?
It was a mind melder for sure.
You know, it's
Mazin.
the same guy, right? Craig Mazin of The
Oh my
Last of
God.
Us.
So glad that got referenced then. I did not know
Yeah,
that.
there you go.
That's awesome. No.
Now
You
that
feel
you
the
know,
similarities. You feel the
yes,
similarities.
I was just about to say you can tell it's the same guy. But
Definitely.
Nah, so we have this scene with Nora in the red lights. She starts swinging away. It's a hard cut to black. It lets you sit with it for 5 seconds. Oh, and then sweet as sugar, just little Joel puts his hands on his hips. Hey, kiddo, sun is shining. She's just waking up on a Saturday or whatever. Oh man, it just takes you back to a happier time. And maybe they'll pick that up next episode, maybe not, but it at least didn't let the torture scene linger. It had a little bit of something to undercut that.
You know, I almost wish it didn't happen.
Same.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing, to be honest. Like, it was obviously like nice to kind of see him and, in that light and be like, okay, we have Joel back. But at the same time, yeah, I kind of wish it didn't happen. I wish it just, because I'm thinking now, what is the purpose of it? Is Ellie asleep now and she's dreaming of Joel? Is this like a flashback that we're about to get into that they're having to kind of bring back that connection that we've talked about? I'm not really quite sure what the where this is leading us to, but it threw me off a little bit. Just like, again, is this Ellie hallucinating as she's beating the piss out of Nora right now? Or again, is she asleep and she's dreaming of Joel again? Or is this a flashback? I have no idea how to take this.
Yeah, I guess for me, it just feels like it would have been more of a statement about the actual journey for Ellie to leave it on. Like, almost the last sound we hear is like the pipe connecting with Nora's leg, and like it's dark, and like we're just sitting there on a Sunday night at 10 p.m. stressing about work for the week and being like, oh my god, like that was crazy. But then we kind of ended on the pager smile, and I was just kind of like, oh, that was.
I also kind of felt like this is about to be Ellie's conscious, like this is her Jiminy Cricket moment of like, Ellie, you shouldn't be going around beating people to death in my name, like just let things go. And that's kind of where I was expecting it to go, and I hope.
You think it's gonna be like that meta? No, it's not gonna be a flashback. It's literally gonna be.
The scene was just so out of place for me that like that's where my mind was kind of going. It's just we get this one scene of Joel coming in this light after experiencing this darkness, and that's where my mind went. But we'll see.
Yeah, I just don't know. I just didn't know how to take it. The only thing I could think of was ask me what I'd do and who I'd do it for. This is the only thing I could think of. Like, is that like the inspiration? I mean, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how we move on to that in the next episode. It would have been kind of crazy though if we ended this episode with like the dark, and then we opened the next episode with Pedro Pascal on the screen.
I feel like that's so much better.
Immediately, I'm like, oh baby.
Look, the episode was still great overall, but it definitely could have. I think it should have just ended with Ellie leaving the viewer with their thoughts of, damn, Ellie just did that. I think that would have been a lot harder.
I tend to agree with you guys. I think it would have lingered with the audience more if they had just left it with that image of Ellie wailing on Nora, but they didn't, and we'll see where they pick it up in the next episode. But that really is kind of the end of episode 5. Do you guys have any broad stroke lasting thoughts that you want to get in?
My broad stroke is just going to be a birthday shout out to Kathleen. One of the illustrious members of
the Queen of Bingetown, the Queen of Bingetown.
The Queen of Bingetown. So happy birthday, Kathleen. I'm sure you're listening right now. It's not your birthday when you're hearing this, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. My other comment in regards will be to Tommy. It's just obviously he went out on his own little side quest here. What kind of forces is he going to encounter? I can't imagine he had smooth sailing with the WLF and Scars both kind of patrolling the areas. So we'll see where Tommy's at.
If we get a Tommy Ellie reunion, that's I missed you, girl. That's just immediate 10 out of 10. Immediate 10 out of 10. Absolute cinema.
God.
There you go. I want to end this episode actually with a little bit more of the video game context, and I'll go over some of the broad stroke differences from this episode. The biggest one, as I recall, this would have been a combination of a couple different missions from the video game, this episode as a whole. Number one, Dina, once they kind of find out that she is pregnant, actually does agree to stick back at the theater, and she's kind of just gaining intel from the walkie-talkie. So on these missions, Ellie is just kind of solo, especially with the hospital, which she still ends up being, but kind of for the whole preface of it, Jesse does come in to save Ellie when she is solo, but the circumstances around it are very different, and I understand why they changed it. It was actually her kind of moving through this suburban area, trying to evade the WLF. In this situation, it's more he saves her from the infected and I guess in turn the WLF, but it's just a little bit different. That was kind of a very long drawn out mission, so I totally understand why they made the difference. Just have them get mauled by a horde of these stalkers. I think that worked fine. Jesse's back in the fold, but other than that, that was really all I was seeing. I think the most important thing was the Nora stuff, which I already kind of said, but they hit it out of the park, in my opinion. This was one of those scenes where I was a little bit, oh, is Bella Ramsey going to be able to bring the stuff? Because this, as you guys said, represents kind of a turn for Ellie. And I think Bella did a very good job, especially in the red light scenes, being intimidating and kind of the line deliveries. I think she did very well. And Nora, in turn, I believe that actress's name is Tati Gabriel. If I got that wrong, so be it. But I actually just love that actress and everything. And I think she did a good job with this Nora role, which I don't know, it was a tertiary role, whatever, but impactful whenever she was on the screen. Overall, I think they did a really good job with this episode. IMDb, it's sitting at a 7.8. I think last episode was like a 6.5. And I think they got some really bad review bombing from the negative part of the community for, you know, the obvious reasons you would suspect. So I don't take much out of that, but 7.8, we're trending back up in the right direction. And yeah, I like this episode a lot. It was very enjoyable. And as I've already said, I'm looking forward to the next 2 or 3, whatever it may be. But anything else from you two?
No, sir.
Good. Zip it. Keep it shut, boys. As always, if you like what you heard, hit that follow or subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating over here on the Binge Empire podcast. And check us out on our other feeds, which I already said. Those are going to be the Unreal podcast, The Core, Final Form, Dark and Twisted. You can find them on Spotify, YouTube, the Apple Podcast app, or wherever else you find your Spotify, YouTube, the Apple Podcast app, or wherever else you may find your podcast. Once again, we, as a whole, are Bingetown TV, and thank you so much for listening.